I never liked taking the bus at night. Not because of ghost stories or paranoia, but because something about waiting alone in the dark made me feel exposed. Like an easy target. That winter, I had just started working the late shift at a convenience store. It wasn't a dream job, but I liked it well enough and I wanted to make a good impression on my boss. That meant never being late. The problem was the buses. Public transport in this city was unreliable at best, and on that particular night it was nearly 30 minutes late. I checked my phone for the third time. No new updates. The bus tracker app wasn't working, and to make things worse, I had zero signal. The streets around me were eerily quiet. No passing cars, no pedestrians. Just the hum of a flickering streetlight and the cold wind biting through my jacket. I shifted my weight, glancing down the empty road. If I waited any longer, I'd be late for work. I knew another bus stop was about a 10-minute walk ahead. If I hurried, maybe I could catch the next bus there. The only problem? The road leading to the next stop passed right by Ravenswood Cemetery. My parents used to warn me about the cemetery. Never cut through it at night, my dad would say, and don't loiter near it either. People said weird things happened there after dark, whispers, shadows that moved when no one was around. I always thought it was just urban legend nonsense. But standing there, staring at the road that ran alongside that cold, silent graveyard, I felt something deep in my gut tell me to stay put. But I ignored it. I adjusted my bag and started walking. At first, the motion felt good. It was better than standing in the cold, and my mind focused on moving forward instead of worrying about why my phone had no signal. But then I noticed something. There were no cars. Even on quiet nights, I'd usually see at least one or two pass by. But the road ahead was completely empty. No headlights, no taillights, just the long stretch of dark pavement. The only light came from the street lamps, which flickered more than usual. And when I glanced toward the cemetery gates, I saw something that made my skin crawl. A white van. It was parked right at the entrance, its front door slightly open. The engine was running. An exhaust curled from the tailpipe into the cold air. But no one was inside. I slowed my pace. My instincts screamed at me to turn around. But I was already halfway to the next stop, and if I went back now, I'd definitely be late. I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe someone had just stepped out for a moment. Maybe it had broken down. But as I passed the van, I felt watched. The cemetery gates stood tall beside me. Their rusted iron bars cracked open just enough for someone to slip through. Beyond them, tombstones stretched into the darkness, barely illuminated by the distant glow of streetlights. That's when I heard it. A scream. It came from inside the cemetery. I froze. The scream was sharp, high-pitched, a girl's voice. It echoed through the cold night air, cutting through the silence like a knife. For a second, I thought I imagined it. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe it was an animal. Then I heard it again. Closer. I turned toward the gate. My breath caught in my throat. I knew I should have kept walking. Every instinct told me not to go in. But what if someone needed help? I hesitated for only a second before squeezing through the gate. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt different, colder, heavier. I moved slowly, my shoes crunching against the frost-covered grass. The headstones around me stood like silent spectators, their names worn and faded. I kept my ears sharp, waiting for another sound, anything to lead me to the girl. Then I heard it. A rustling noise just ahead, near a large mausoleum. I moved closer, keeping my footsteps light. As I reached the corner of the structure, I peered around it, and what I saw made my blood run cold. A man, dressed in dark clothing, crouched near a fresh mound of dirt, and he was digging. For a moment, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. The man was hunched over, a shovel in his hand, scooping dirt from what looked like a freshly dug grave. His back was to me, but I could see his movements were hurried, frantic. Then I saw something else. A small hand. It was sticking out from the dirt. My stomach twisted. My breath caught in my throat. The hand moved. The girl was alive. Before I could think, my foot slipped on the frozen ground. I let out a sharp gasp, and the man stopped digging. The air went dead silent. Slowly, he turned his head, and that's when I saw his face, or rather, lack of one. His skin was pale, stretched tight over his skull. His eyes were black pits, sunken deep, like two endless voids. His mouth was too wide, lips cracked and peeling, curled into something that barely resembled a smile. Then, in a voice that didn't sound human, he whispered, "You shouldn't be here." I ran. I didn't look back, didn't stop to see if he was following. I just sprinted toward the gate, my lungs burning, my heart hammering against my ribs. The headstones blurred past me. The cemetery seemed bigger than before, the exit farther away. Then, footsteps. Heavy, fast, gaining on me. I pushed harder, ignoring the pain in my legs. The gate was just ahead, so close. Then something grabbed my jacket. I screamed, twisting, breaking free. I stumbled through the gate, nearly falling onto the pavement. When I turned back, he was gone. The cemetery was silent. The only thing left was the white van, still idling, its driver's seat empty. And then, a shadow moved behind it. A small figure stepped into the dim light. The girl. She stood there, staring at me. Her eyes were wide, hollow. Her lips barely moved as she whispered something I couldn't hear. Then slowly, she turned and walked back into the cemetery. The gate swung shut behind her, and the wind carried her last whisper to me. "He won't let me leave." I never told my boss why I missed my shift that night. I never told my parents why I stopped taking the bus altogether. A few weeks later, I saw a news report. A white van had been found abandoned near Ravenswood Cemetery. It belonged to a man suspected of multiple kidnappings, a man they had never caught. The police asked for witnesses, but I stayed silent, because deep down I knew the truth. That thing in the cemetery wasn't a man. And the girl? She was never meant to leave. I never liked taking the bus. Public transportation always made me uneasy, but I told myself it was just anxiety, just my overactive imagination turning every harmless stranger into a potential threat. That's what I thought that night too, even when my gut kept warning me that something was off. But I ignored it. I told myself I was just being paranoid. I learned the hard way that I should have listened. It was late, later than I wanted it to be. I had stayed behind at work to help close up, and by the time I stepped outside, the streets were nearly empty. The glow of streetlights reflected off damp pavement, and the only sounds were distant traffic and the occasional rustle of a stray plastic bag caught in the wind. I tugged my hoodie tighter around me, feeling the chill of the night air. The bus stop wasn't far, just a 5-minute walk down the road, but every step felt longer than usual. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way the shadows stretched too far under the flickering streetlights. Or maybe it was the man standing at the bus stop. I noticed him from a distance, a tall, broad-shouldered figure dressed in dark clothing. He stood too still, his face obscured by the shadow of his hood. I forced myself to keep walking, my fingers tightening around my bag strap. It's fine. It's just another passenger. But something about him set me on edge. When I reached the stop, I hesitated for a split second before sitting on the farthest end of the bench, putting as much space as I could between us. The man didn't move, didn't even shift his weight, just stood there, facing the empty street. I glanced at my phone. The bus was due in 5 minutes. I prayed it wouldn't be late. A few minutes passed. The man still hadn't moved. I stole another glance at him from the corner of my eye. His hands were buried deep in his pockets, his shoulders slightly hunched. Something about his posture seemed tense, like he was waiting for something, or someone. A car passed by, its headlights illuminating the bus stop for a brief second. That's when I noticed it. His shoes, they were wet, soaking actually. Water dripped from them onto the pavement, pooling around his feet. It hadn't rained that evening. A slow, creeping unease settled in my chest. I looked away, my pulse quickening. That's when I heard it. A whisper, low, muffled, almost like a voice carried on the wind. I froze, my fingers tightening around my phone. The whispering continued, soft, urgent, coming from somewhere close. Too close. I turned my head slightly, heart hammering against my ribs. The man was still standing there, his face hidden, but his lips were moving. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe evenly. Maybe he was just talking to himself. Maybe he had an earpiece in. Or maybe I was overreacting. Again. The bus needed to get here. Now I looked down the road. Empty. Nothing but endless pavement stretching into darkness. The whispering stopped. I turned back toward the man. He was staring at me. A jolt of cold fear shot through me. His face was partially hidden by the hood, but I could see his eyes, dark, wide, and locked onto mine. I forced myself to hold his gaze for half a second before looking away, my breathing shaky. Then he did something that made my stomach drop. He stepped closer. Not much, just half a step. Barely noticeable. But I noticed. I gripped my bag tighter, my thoughts racing. Was I overreacting? Should I leave? But where would I go? The next bus stop was too far, and I didn't want to walk alone at this hour. I glanced at my phone again. 2 minutes. Just 2 more minutes. Another figure approached from the opposite end of the street. A woman, maybe in her 30s, wearing a faded jacket and jeans. She didn't seem to notice anything off as she walked toward the stop, her eyes focused on her phone. Relief flooded through me. She stopped a few feet away and glanced up briefly. "Bus late?" she asked casually. I forced a small smile. "Yeah, should be here soon." She nodded, turning her attention back to her screen. I risked another glance at the man. He was still staring, but now he was grinning. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't a normal smile, it was wrong. Wide, too wide. Like his face didn't quite know how to move naturally. The woman beside me must have noticed my tension because she glanced up from her phone. She followed my gaze and frowned slightly. "You all right?" she murmured. I hesitated. I didn't want to seem crazy, but a low chuckle cut through the silence. My heart nearly stopped. It came from him. The woman stiffened. I wasn't imagining this. The bus finally appeared in the distance, its headlights cutting through the darkness. I felt a wave of relief so strong it almost made me dizzy. As it approached, the man took another step forward, then another. I could hear his breathing now, ragged, uneven. The woman moved closer to me, subtly shifting so she was between us. I don't think she even realized she did it. The bus hissed to a stop in front of us. The doors creaked open. The man didn't move. The woman and I hesitated for half a second before practically lunging inside. The second we were in, the doors shut behind us. I turned to look out the window, expecting to see him still standing there, but he was gone. The bus pulled away. I let out a shaky breath, my body finally relaxing. The woman sat beside me, her own face tense. "You saw that, right?" I whispered. She nodded slowly. "Yeah." Neither of us said anything else. The rest of the ride was silent, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we had gotten away from something we weren't supposed to. And when I finally got home, I realized something that made my stomach drop all over again. The pavement where the man had stood had been dry, but his shoes had been soaking wet, and I had no idea why. I still don't know what really happened that night. I tried looking up missing persons reports, police records, anything that might explain who he was or why he was there. I found nothing, but sometimes, when I'm alone at a bus stop late at night, I swear I can still hear whispering, and I never ever take the last bus anymore. I still don't know why I never told anyone. Maybe I was scared they wouldn't believe me. Maybe I was scared they would. But looking back, I realized just how close I came to something truly horrifying. This happened when I was 12 years old, back in 6th grade. It was the kind of thing that you'd expect to see in a true crime documentary, but when it happens to you, it doesn't feel real. It just feels like a bad dream you can't wake up from. Every day after school, I took the bus home. It wasn't a long ride, about 15 minutes, and my mom always picked me up from the bus stop. My parents were never married and my dad lived nearby, so it made sense for me to get off at a stop close to his house. But I hated being at his place. He and I never got along and his new wife was a nightmare, always criticizing me, making me feel like I was in the way. So every afternoon I waited outside the bus stop until my mom's car pulled up. I never went inside, it was usually fine. But that day was different. I remember it was cold, not freezing, but that kind of chilly air that made me tuck my hands into my sleeves while I stood there, shifting from foot to foot. The street was busy but not packed, with the occasional car passing by and a few people walking down the sidewalk. I pulled out my flip phone, yeah, it was one of those old, clunky ones, and checked the time. My mom was 10 minutes late. I texted her. Me. Hey, where are you? No reply. I waited another 5 minutes before trying again. Me. Mom? Still nothing. Now I was starting to feel anxious. I wasn't a paranoid kid, but something about standing alone made me hyper-aware of my surroundings. I could feel eyes on me, even though no one was really looking. Then my phone buzzed. Mom. Running late. Just go to your dad's and wait inside. Nope. Not happening. I would rather stand in the cold for an hour than step foot in that house. So I stayed put. And that's when I saw him. Across the street, there was a house with a red door. I had seen it a million times before. It wasn't anything special, just another boring suburban house. But that day, the front door creaked open and a man stepped outside. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, with curly brown hair and an oversized blue jacket. At first, I didn't think anything of it. He could have been taking out the trash or going for a walk. But he didn't. Instead, he just stood there, watching. I felt my stomach tighten. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe he was just spacing out or looking at something behind me. But I knew. I could feel his eyes on me. Then he started moving. I lost sight of him for a second because of a bush blocking my view, but my gut told me he was coming closer. That's when I called my mom. She didn't pick up right away. It took 3 tries before I finally heard her voice. Mom, hey honey, I'll be there in about 10 minutes, okay? Her voice made me feel a little better, but I still felt on edge. Me. Okay, just hurry please. Mom, are you okay? Me. Yeah, just cold. That was a lie. But I didn't want to sound dramatic. We talked for another minute, then I hung up. I let out a slow breath, telling myself that in just 10 minutes I'd be safe in her car. But that's when the man rounded the corner. Now he was right in front of me. Up close, he looked older than I expected, maybe in his late 30s. His smile was off, not friendly, not warm, just wrong. Him. Hey, I've been watching you. My entire body went stiff. Him. You've been standing out here for a while. Why don't you come inside and wait? I forced a nervous laugh. Me. Oh, my mom's almost here, so I'll just wait. His smile faded. Him. Come on, just for a second. He stepped closer. I backed away. My mind was racing. Should I run? Should I scream? I wanted to call my mom again, but my hands felt frozen. Then he reached out his arm. I jerked back, heart pounding. But just as he moved toward me, a woman jogged around the corner. She didn't even look at us, but it was enough. I grabbed onto the chance like a lifeline. Me. Oh, hey, Mom. I sprinted away before he could react, running toward the jogger. I didn't stop until I was halfway up the street, far enough that I couldn't see him anymore. Then I called my mom. I didn't tell her. I just said I got bored and went for a walk. When she picked me up, I didn't say a word about the man. I don't know why. Maybe I was scared she wouldn't believe me. Maybe I just wanted to forget. And I did. For a while. 1 year later, I was at my dad's house for dinner when I heard them talking about it. Dad, did you hear about that guy up the street? Stepmom, the one who went to jail? Yeah. My ears perked up. Dad, apparently he beat some guy to death in the park. Stepmom, yeah, and they think he was luring girls there too. He used candy or something. My stomach dropped. Me? Where did he live? Stepmom, oh, you know that house with the red door? Right next to the park. I felt cold all over. I wanted to tell them. I wanted to scream. But I didn't, because I already knew, and I didn't need anyone to confirm that I had barely escaped something unspeakable. I still think about that day, about what would have happened if I had stepped closer, if I had let him grab me, if the jogger had never shown up. I was lucky. Not everyone is. So please always be aware of your surroundings, because sometimes the difference between life and death is just a matter of seconds. I never liked taking the bus at night, but I didn't have a choice. It was late October, and the air had that sharp chill that made my breath visible. I had just finished my shift at a small coffee shop downtown. Normally, I work the afternoon shifts, but tonight, my manager had begged me to cover for someone, and I had agreed. Big mistake. The last bus to my neighborhood stopped at 10:45 p.m., and I had barely made it. As I stepped onto the near-empty bus, I took a seat near the front, gripping the strap of my backpack tight. There were only a few other passengers, a middle-aged woman in a thick coat staring at her phone, a man in a hoodie slumped against the window, and a teenager tapping away on his laptop a few rows back. Nothing out of the ordinary. Except for him. A man sitting across the aisle from me. Mid-40s, bald, thin, with sunken eyes and a permanent smirk stretched across his face. The moment I sat down, he turned his head toward me. His eyes were sharp and unblinking. I tried not to react, pulling out my phone to text my mom. Just got on the bus. Home soon. I clicked send, then glanced up. He was still staring. I felt a familiar chill run down my spine, the kind that came when you just knew something was wrong. I turned away, pretending to scroll through my phone, but I could feel his eyes burning into me. The bus rattled along, stopping every few blocks. More people got off, but no one new got on. After about 15 minutes, it was just me, the hoodie guy in the back, and him. I wanted to move, maybe sit closer to the driver, but something told me that if I reacted too suddenly, he'd take it as an invitation. So I just stayed still. Then the worst thing happened. He grinned. A slow, deliberate grin that made my stomach twist, like he knew I was uncomfortable and was enjoying it. The bus was approaching my stop, but suddenly I wasn't sure if I wanted to get off. What if he followed me? I gripped the pepper spray in my jacket pocket, just in case. The bus slowed. My stop was coming up. And that's when he moved. The moment I reached for the cord, he stood up too. Too quickly. Too eagerly. My heart slammed against my ribs. I hesitated. If I got off now, he'd definitely follow. I made a split-second decision. I didn't move. The bus stopped. The doors hissed open. I waited. The driver looked back, confused. You getting off? The man turned to look at me, still grinning. I shook my head. Number next one. The driver shrugged and pulled away. The man's grin faltered just for a second, but he sat back down. I had avoided him following me home, but now I was still trapped on this bus with him. And there weren't many stops left. 2 stops later, the hoodie guy in the back got off. That left just me and him. I felt like my breathing was too loud, my every movement exaggerated. I needed to think. If I got off at my usual stop, he'd follow me down the dark, empty street. If I stayed on the bus too long, I'd end up in a part of town I didn't know. The bus rumbled along, the streetlights blurring past the window. Then he did something that made my blood turn to ice. He leaned in slightly and whispered, "Not your stop either, huh?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I gripped my backpack tighter, forcing myself to breathe evenly. He chuckled, a low, dry sound. Smart girl. The next stop was coming up. I had to do something. I pulled the cord. I wasn't sure if I was making the right decision, but I had to get off the bus. The doors hissed open. I stood up slowly, pretending to be calm. But as I stepped off, so did he. My stomach dropped. The bus pulled away, leaving us on the sidewalk. The street was too quiet, the only sound the distant hum of traffic. I turned left, walking fast, my keys in one hand, my pepper spray in the other. His footsteps followed, a few paces behind me. Steady, unhurried. I picked up my pace. So did he. I turned a corner, hoping there would be people, a store, a car, anything. Nothing. Just dim street lights and closed shops. I was alone with him, and then I heard him laugh. Low, amused, like he was enjoying this. I ran. I sprinted down the sidewalk, heart pounding. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. Then I saw it, a gas station up ahead, bright lights, a cashier inside. Safety. I dashed toward it, but then a hand grabbed my backpack. I screamed, twisting away, yanking myself free. I didn't even think. I just spun around and sprayed the pepper spray directly into his eyes. He howled, stumbling back. I didn't wait to see what he did next. I ran straight into the gas station. The cashier, a guy in his 20s, looked up, startled. "Hey, you okay?" I was shaking, barely able to speak. "That man, he followed me. He grabbed me." The cashier stepped around the counter and peered outside. The man was still out there, rubbing his eyes, muttering curses. Then, he grinned at me through the glass, like this wasn't over. The cashier grabbed his phone. "I'm calling the cops." The man turned and walked away. The police came. I gave them a description, but he was gone. They told me I did the right thing by using the spray, but that didn't make me feel any better. Because I knew deep down that if I hadn't had it, if I hadn't run, he would have caught me. That night, I sat awake in my bed, every creak in my apartment making my skin crawl. I didn't take the bus at night anymore, and I never forgot his face, or that grin. Because even now, sometimes when I'm walking home alone, I feel like someone's still watching, waiting, laughing, like he's still out there. And next time, I might not get away. I was 17 when it happened. At that age, you don't think about danger the same way adults do. You assume you're invincible. You assume bad things only happen to other people. I used to take the bus everywhere. School, the gym, friends' houses. I didn't have my own car yet, and my parents were usually too busy to pick me up. That night was no different. Sunday. Cold as hell. I had just finished my workout at the gym, sweat cooling on my skin as I stepped outside into the bitter wind. I checked my phone. 9:45 p.m. The last bus was scheduled to come in 5 minutes. The streets were nearly empty, the kind of quiet that makes everything feel eerie. Snow had started falling again, covering the sidewalks in a fresh dusting of white. I pulled my hood up and made my way to the bus stop. It was a small glass shelter on the corner of a deserted street. The city had been hit by a snowstorm earlier in the week, and ice still clung to the edges of the pavement. The streetlights cast long, sharp shadows on the ground. I sat down on the cold metal bench, exhaling deeply. My breath fogged up in the air. 5 minutes, that's all. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling, trying to ignore the way the wind howled through the empty streets. Then my screen refreshed. Bus canceled. I stared at it, my stomach sinking. What the hell? I tapped the app, hoping it was a mistake. Nope, the next bus wasn't coming for another hour. I sighed, leaning back against the glass. I could have called my parents, but they had gone out of town for dinner. A taxi would cost more than I had on me. I was stuck. For the first 10 minutes, I kept my head down, listening to music. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed someone approaching. A man. He came from the far end of the street, walking slowly. Too slowly. His clothes were layered like he had thrown on whatever he could find. A heavy coat, a thick scarf wrapped around his neck, and a beanie pulled low over his forehead. His movements were uneven, like he was unsteady on his feet. I kept my gaze locked on my phone, pretending not to notice him. Maybe he'd walk past, but he didn't. Instead, he stepped inside the shelter and sat down at the far end of the bench. Too close. I shifted slightly, angling my body away from him. He smelled off. Not like alcohol, but something stale, unwashed. A few seconds passed before he spoke. "When's the bus coming?" His voice was raspy, uneven. I hesitated, then pulled out my earphones. I think it's delayed." He didn't respond. Just sat there staring at the ground. Then after a moment, he started mumbling to himself. I couldn't make out what he was saying. His lips moved rapidly, whispering something over and over. A slow unease crept up my spine. I tightened my grip on my phone, keeping my head down. Don't engage, just wait it out. I tried to ignore him, but then, a sound, a slow, dragging noise. I glanced up. He had moved closer. Not much, just a few inches, but it was enough. I looked away again, my fingers clenching around my phone. Shh. Another inch. I turned sharply. "You okay there?" He blinked, his bloodshot eyes meeting mine. His pupils looked strange, dilated, unfocused. Then, without warning, he lifted his arm and reached toward me. I jerked backward instinctively. That was it. I grabbed my bag and bolted. I ran, hard. My breath came out in ragged gasps as I sprinted down the empty street. The cold air burned my lungs, but I didn't stop. After about 4 blocks, I spotted another bus stop. Empty. I turned back, heart pounding. He wasn't there. I let out a shaky breath and sat down, rubbing my hands together for warmth. It was fine. I was fine. Maybe he was just messed up on something. I leaned back against the cold glass, closing my eyes for just a second. Knock, knock, knock. I jerked forward, my stomach twisting. I turned around. He was there, right outside the shelter, staring at me through the glass. I shot up from the bench. "What the hell is wrong with you?" My voice came out shaky. He didn't answer. Instead, he started walking around the shelter. Slowly, methodically. I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling. "I'm warning you. Stay. Back." For a moment, he stopped. Then, without a word, he lunged. I barely dodged in time. He hit the ground hard, face smacking against the pavement. I stumbled back, chest heaving. And then I saw it. Blood. He didn't move. For a second, I stood there, frozen. Then, cautiously, I stepped closer. "Hey, you okay?" Nothing. I pulled out my phone and called 911. The paramedics arrived within minutes, red and blue lights flashing across the snow. The police checked his pockets for ID, and that's when they found it. A photograph. It was old, creased, but I could still make out the faces. A man, him, and a boy. A boy who looked just like me. One of the officers pulled me aside. "He's been on heavy medication. He probably mistook you for someone else." I stared at the photo. The boy had the same dark hair as me. Same building, same sharp nose. The officer sighed. We looked into his record. He lost custody of his son years ago. Never got over it. I didn't know what to say. They took him away that night for treatment, they said. I never saw him again. A week later, I got my driver's license. I haven't taken the bus since. I was 15 the first time I realized how fast your world could flip upside down. I wasn't the type to pick fights or make enemies. I minded my business, did my schoolwork, and counted the hours until I could go home. But sometimes, it didn't matter what kind of person you were. Danger had a way of finding you anyway. I took the bus home every day, sitting in my usual spot about 10 rows from the front. It wasn't anything special, just a cracked vinyl seat by the window. where I could rest my head against the cool glass and drown out the noise with music. The first time I saw him, I barely noticed. He was just another student, older than me, maybe 18 or 19, sitting a few rows behind. I didn't know his name and I didn't care to. But that changed fast. It started small, a tap against the back of my seat. A small, rhythmic thud that I could barely hear over my headphones. At first I ignored it. Probably just someone fidgeting or tapping their knee. But after a full minute of the steady knocking, I turned around. "Hey, can you stop?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. The guy behind me, tall, built like a linebacker with dark, watchful eyes, grinned. Yeah, my bad." I turned back, thinking that was the end of it. But then it happened again. Not just tapping this time, harder, more deliberate. A dull thud, thud, thud against the back of my seat. I twisted around again. "Dude, seriously, stop." He held up his hands in mock surrender. All right. I turned back, shoulders tense. There was something about his tone, something that made my gut twist in a way I didn't like. Still, I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. He was just being annoying, right? No need to escalate things. But then I caught something out of the corner of my eye. A flicker of metal. I turned my head slightly, pretending to look out the window. He had something in his hand. A knife. Not some huge hunting knife. Just a small, sharp blade about an inch long. He was using it to pick at the stitches in the seat, slicing through the old vinyl like it was butter. My pulse spiked. I faced forward again, gripping my backpack tight. Maybe he wasn't trying to scare me. Maybe he was just messing around. But still, who carried a knife like that? I told myself not to panic, but I didn't turn around again. The next day I told myself it was nothing. Just a weird, random moment. I took my usual seat. A few minutes later he got on too, and the tapping started again. Thud, thud, thud. I clenched my jaw. I knew he was doing it on purpose now. I turned around, slower this time. I said stop. He just smiled, a lazy, knowing grin like he was enjoying this. "I'm not doing anything." His hand was resting against the back of my seat. His fingers tapped the vinyl slowly, deliberately. Then he lifted his hand just enough for me to see it. The knife. It was small, but the way he held it, casual, like it was just an extension of his fingers, made my skin crawl. And then he said something that made my blood run cold. "I'm not tapping. I'm stabbing it." I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I had no idea what to say to that. I faced forward again, gripping my backpack so tight my knuckles turned white. I needed to get off this bus. I needed to tell someone. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and texted my mom. "There's a guy behind me with a knife. He's messing with my seat. I don't know what to do." I saw the little dots pop up immediately. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, but I'm scared. Stay calm." "I'm calling the police." My stomach dropped. Calling the cops? That meant the bus was going to stop. That meant he was going to know I was the one who told. I felt sick. A few minutes later, I saw the flashing lights in the distance. The bus slowed, pulled over. The driver stood up, looking confused. "Everyone stay seated." The doors hissed open. A police officer stepped inside. "Who called?" Silence. I kept my eyes forward, frozen. The officer scanned the bus, then asked again. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stand. "I think my mom called." My voice came out shaky, too quiet. The officer motioned for me to step off the bus. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to move. Outside, the officer crouched slightly to meet my eye level. "What happened?" I told him. "Everything." And as I spoke, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just some stupid high school drama. It wasn't me being paranoid. I had been scared, and that was enough. They found the knife. Not on him. He had stuffed it inside the ripped lining of the seat, but they searched the area, and eventually, they found it. It wasn't just some pocket knife. It was about 4 inches long, covered in bright pink gems, like something you'd buy from a flea market. But the blade was sharp. Too sharp. He was arrested right there. For assault. For bringing a weapon onto school property. For threatening a minor. I should have felt relieved. But then the rumors started. By the time I got to school the next day, everyone was talking about it. Except, according to them, I had made the whole thing up. Dude, he was just messing around. It was scissors, not a knife. Why'd you snitch? He wasn't gonna do anything. And the worst one, you only called the cops 'cause he's black. That one hit different. I had never cared about race. I didn't give a damn what someone looked like, where they were from, or who they loved. My parents raised me to respect people no matter what. But now people were looking at me like I was the bad guy. Like I had ruined his life. I started questioning myself. Did I overreact? Did I make a mistake? But then I remembered the feeling of that knife tapping against my seat. I remembered the way he smiled when he said he was stabbing it. And I knew I did the right thing. Even if no one else saw it that way. I still think about that day. About how close I came to ignoring my gut instinct. About what could have happened if I had. If there's one thing I learned, it's this. If something feels wrong, don't stay silent. Not everyone will believe you. Not everyone will be on your side. But that doesn't mean you're wrong. And it doesn't mean you should be afraid to speak up. Because sometimes the difference between walking away and never making it home is just one last stop.